introduce myself. I am with the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance. Our center is one of several federal TA centers, and we're jointly funded by the Office of Child Care, the Office of Head Start, and Health Resources and Services Administration. Our center supports the work of states, territories, and tribes in promoting healthy, safe, and high quality environments for children. And we're very proud and very grateful to be able to support webinars like this for you all who are doing the really hard work day in and day out. Again, I want to reiterate that the webinar is being recorded and will be posted in the coming days as soon as we make it 508 compliant. And I'm not sure if somebody can help. There are a couple people in the chat box that can't hear. So, Carol, not sure if you can type in there again some of the suggestions that were on the preceding slide, but that would be helpful for me since Violetta got disconnected. Our agenda today is to let you know about the ARP stabilization grants that will be forthcoming to your state, territory, or tribe. We have special guests who will help you be prepared once those applications become available. And then we also have links to resources that can help you help you prepare for making applications. So we'll hear in a minute from a representative from the Office of Child Care and then launch into the webinar. So, but before we do, we really wanted to get a sense of you know me, we wanted to get a sense of who was on the call. So that you'll see a poll. We're asking that you please select the role that best fits your need, your function. Sherry, as much as Sherry asked, how will we know when the link to this will be posted? We'll try to send out a follow-up and a follow-up email to all of the folks that are on the call, and let you know that it is available. And I see some of you are answering the other in the chat, and we really appreciate that. And Carol is also giving some tips in the chat. We're just going to give folks a minute to do that. Okay, thanks. It looks like for the most part, were your child care center directors or other types of program directors or administrators who are in the field doing the hard work. And with that, I think I'm going to now turn it over to Litha Chun. Litha Chun is a program specialist with the Office of Child Care, and she is also the federal program officer with the National Center on Early Childhood Quality Assurance, which is our center. And Violetta, are you able to bring Litha up? Hmm. Well, if you'll all give us just a minute, our tech person has lost audio. So, and I am going to, Letha, I don't know that I can't. I think, Letha, why don't you try to enable your video? Do you think that you can do that? You're not muted. We're experiencing just a little bit of a technical hiccup, so we'll be right with you. Okay. Well, we try to work that out. I am going to move to this slide, and at the end of the call, you'll have, again, access to the resources that you're seeing so that you can pull even more. One of the things that's wonderful for the childcare field right now is really a historic investment in made to try to stabilize the childcare market. And this graphic shows the three legislation pieces of legislation that have passed to support childcare programs like yours and to stabilize the childcare market. And I start with this because you may be accessing currently grants and resources that have been made available through the first two allocations. The first is the Coronavirus Response and Economic Security Act, or you may have heard it referred to as the CARES Act. That was passed in March of 2020. And secondly is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations, or the CRSA Act. And that was enacted in December of 2020. Again, some of you may be recipients right now of funds that were made available through those two pieces of legislation. We're going to talk today about the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARP Act, which is the latest of the COVID-19 relief funds legislation to be passed. And in particular, we're going to talk about the stabilization grants made available through the the ARP, if you will, the ARP Act. These stabilization grants will be coming to your state, territory, and tribe, and they're designed specifically to address the burdens that you're feeling as a result of COVID-19, as well as specifically about the instability of the childcare market as a whole. And the key is we really want you to be prepared when the applications are released in your state, territory, or by your tribe, so that you'll be ready when they become available. Again, I want to reiterate that most states, territories, and tribes have not yet released their stabilization grant applications. They're working diligently and intentionally to make these grants available. Um, and so our partner, First Children's Finance, who is here, I hope when we get the audio straightened out, will be providing you with an overview about the federal guidance relative to the stabilization grants and how that guidance will impact you, some things that you can do to get ready. But it's important to remember that once the application is released in your state, territory, or by your tribe, you want to read it carefully and understand any of the unique elements within it. If the stabilization grant fund applications might be available in your state, territory, or tribe this month. It might be next month. It might be 6 months down the road. States, territories, and tribes do have some flexibility in terms of when they make the applications available. And again, they're thinking and preparing the process. They do have until September 30, 2020 to obligate the funds, and they have until September 30, 2023 to liquidate the funds. Again, we just want you to be prepared when those funds become available. And so now I am going to see if Molly or Heidi can activate their video, and I'll introduce them. Oh, yay!
Hi, everyone. Can you confirm that you can hear and see us, Patty?
I can hear and see you, and I'm going to go dark now. Thank you for.
Okay. Thank you all so much for being here today and for persisting through some technical issues. Technology brings us together, but it's not flawless. So we're really glad that you, with the critical jobs that you have, are dedicating some time today to listen to this information. We know that there are so many different people here with us today. I saw state grant administrators, state agency folks. I saw after-school directors, child care center directors, family child care homeowners, among many hundreds of others. So when we use the term today, child care or child care business, we mean that to be an inclusive term for all of you who are here today who are providing childcare, whether that is to big kids after school or before school, little kids before they're in school, or some other form you're providing care for children while their adults are at work or school. The information that you'll hear from us today is meant to help you get ready for childcare stabilization grants when they are released by your state, tribe, or territory. This is a sort of pre-work, getting ready, studying for the test, etc. type of presentation. There's nothing that you've missed. You're not behind. You're not late. So just get ready to take some notes and ask your questions in the chat. And if we can't get the answer to you today, hopefully we can in the future. With that being said, my name is Molly Sullivan. I'm the Director of National Initiatives, and I am here with my colleague Heidi Hagelbraid on behalf of First Children's Finance. We can go to the next slide, if we can. Okay. All right. So our goal today is to provide some considerations for you as a business owner, a center director, to think about and consider and gather questions and gather information as you prepare for whenever your state child care stabilization grant is released in your area. Depending on where you live, there may be some child care stabilization funding released that comes from other sources. As Patty's slide showed, there have been 3 pieces of legislation, all which have some funding for childcare, and there are many pools of funding that are active now and may be active in the future. So we want to provide some information for you as you prepare for the childcare stabilization grants that are funded by the American Rescue Plan. What we're not doing is telling you what to do or providing recommendations or telling you how to answer any questions. We're just hoping to be a helpful resource, and we can go to the next slide. Excellent. Okay, so as I just said, we're not providing recommendations or telling you what to do. And I'm sharing the disclaimer that anything Heidi Hagelbraid or I share with you today on behalf of First Children's Finance is not legal advice, accounting, tax, or finance advice. And you should consult professionals in those fields if you have specific questions about your business as it relates to childcare stabilization grants. We can go ahead. So hopefully you can see us live on the screen, but here are our pictures as well. Heidi Hagelbraid is the Chief Program Officer for First Children's Finance. She's been a leader with First Children's Finance for over 8 years. She oversees many initiatives, programs, and offices within First Children's Finance. And I am Molly Sullivan, the Director of National Initiatives. And I thank you all for your patience as I present today with a slight cold. Please let me know if you can't hear by saying so in the chat. We can go to the next slide. So who are we presenting to you today? We are a nonprofit organization founded in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but now with state offices in the state of Minnesota, Michigan, and Iowa. We are a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution, which means we conduct financial transactions, and First Children's Finance does that exclusively with childcare businesses. So we might lend to someone who's just starting their childcare business. We might lend to someone who's doing really well and is expanding, or we might lend to someone for another reason. In addition to lending, we provide technical assistance to build that business owner's capacity to make financial decisions on their own for the good of their business and the children they care for. We've been a nonprofit organization for 30 years. And in addition to our state offices, we work with about 20 states and native nations that share the same geography as the United States. And we are unique in the way that we work, and you'll hear about that more on the next slide. So we work on 3 levels. One, with the individual childcare business owner. That is the majority of you here today. That family childcare homeowner, that center director, that YWCA or YMCA director. We work directly with childcare business owners, potentially to lend, but also to provide coaching and leadership capacity building. We do cohort trainings where people can build a network of other childcare business owners in their area. And we provide a menu of other services directly to childcare business owners. We also work with communities. And I know that some of you are here today from research institutions or nonprofits who might also be working with communities. So we consult with communities to address the childcare needs and issues that they are facing, because every community is unique and every community needs a right-sized solution to specifically meet their needs. And lastly, we work at a state and systems level, and that encompasses state agencies, for those of you who are here today from state agencies, federal coalitions or offices, as well as native nations and their government. And we work to reform the systems of early care and education funding streams, or TA and training, or just the whole ecosystem in general to make it function better for everyone. So now that you know a little bit about us, let's talk about the American Rescue Plan Child Care Stabilization Grants. So we're preparing today we're presenting today some information as you prepare for these grants. These are just points of consideration and information. You may have additional questions after this webinar, and that is good. And we'll tell you how to get more information should you have additional questions. So as Patty shared, the American Rescue Plan was passed in March 2021. It's been a while since then, so let's all just get caught up on what that rescue plan did and what exactly we're talking about here today. In between today, or the passing of the plan and today, there was a federal guidance released, and Heidi and I will share some key takeaways from that federal guidance. As people in the chat have already shared, they are accessing and utilizing funding from multiple streams. So while we're talking about the American Rescue Plan stabilization grants today, you may have applied for other federal funding, small business funding, direct loans from financial institutions that you have relationships with, community philanthropic support, etc. So this is one funding stream in a long list of federal funding streams that are supporting small businesses and childcare businesses specifically at this time due to the financial crisis that COVID-19 has spurred. We'll talk about eligibility for childcare stabilization grants, the grant award terms, which there's a lot of customization available there. So we'll present some general information, but you'll want to be in touch with your state, tribe, or territory about what specifically applies and where you live. the allowable uses of the funding, and some things to be aware of for monitoring as you begin to your application, and then should you accept the funding as you implement it. And we can move to the next slide. So one of the things that we are aware of is that childcare businesses, out of school time businesses, after school, before school businesses, summer programming, any of those business owners, they may have questions about if they are applying for the funding, how will that funding be taxed and how will it impact their business? So this could present a challenge. Any feelings of uncertainty might create a barrier for you or your business in accessing that funding. So something to think about is, what questions do you have about American Rescue Plan Child Care Stabilization grants? And who will you direct your tax questions to? Do you currently work with a CPA? That might be a great person to ask the question of. Do you currently fall under an umbrella organization who has a CFO or a tax professional on staff? You could talk to them about your questions. However you found out about this webinar today, that might be an organization or a person who you could direct future questions to. So just gather your questions and don't let any uncertainties stop you from seeking funding that's specifically meant to stabilize the businesses that you run. We can go to the next slide. So like any financial application, you usually have to sign a number of documents and date them where there's little tabs or highlighted sections. And what you're doing is you're certifying, swearing to, attesting to is another word, certain information that you will do or will not do certain things with the funding, that you will do or will not do certain activities while you receive the funding. So your state, tribe, or territory will have certain attestations in the Child Care Stabilization Grant Fund. There might be language in there that you're unfamiliar with. You will want to read it carefully, and you'll want to ask for plain language interpretations if you have questions about them. Talk about them with someone in your state, tribe, or territory. Talk about them with a colleague or other directors who you're familiar with. Make sure that you're getting your questions answered before you swear or certify anything. You can go to the next slide. So grant award terms. What this means is if you apply for the funding and then you receive the funding, there will be certain conditions that apply. Your state, tribe, or territory may use many different ways to determine the amount that each childcare business, out of school time business, after school program, etc., receives based on their application. So we thought it would be helpful for you to understand some of the ways that funding administrators might determine the funding amount. One is a cost estimation model. One is putting together formulas based on enrollment and the region in your area where your childcare business is located. Another option might be to send out surveys to a wide variety of licensed care providers where you are and see if there's a general average that could be generated. And then another is to sample childcare business owners, providers' current operating expenses and use that information to inform the funding determination made. We don't have specific information about how your state, tribe, or territory is going to determine grant awards, and we encourage you to reach out if you have questions about grant award determination to the state, tribe, or territory where you are located. So each state, tribe, or territory also has some flexibility in the timeline for the funding. As Patty shared, each state, tribe, or territory will release their application on their own timeline, make decisions, and notify you, and then distribute funding according to a timeline that works with them within the requirements of the law. They may also monitor and ask for monitoring information that they may have never asked you before. They're trying to collect information to make good decisions. And so they might reach out to you with certain questions that will help them make future funding decisions. And we want you to be aware, as we've said, that there are multiple pools of funding available. And we're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan Child Care Stabilization grants today, but the eligibility, timeline, applications, and monitoring requirements for each of those pools of funding may be different. So you'll really have to be familiar with what's happening where you live in order to make sure that your business meets the criteria and that you're comfortable with the grant award terms. So again, you will want more information after this. Today is a starting point, not an ending point. So think about how you organize and track information about grant opportunities, and think about how you organize and track funding information in your own business, especially if your state, tribe, or territory will be asking you some monitoring questions, following up with you about how the funding is spent or outcomes related to the funding. We can go to the next slide. Another key takeaway from the guidance is a discussion about allowable uses. So you'll see in the green font on one column of this slide, there are many allowable uses for the Child Care Stabilization grants. These grants are intended to cover some of the operating expenses that your business is struggling with due to the financial crisis that started when COVID-19 was declared a public health emergency. So you may have never applied for a grant before, or you may have applied for hundreds of grants and you're used to reporting this information. And I'm sure there are people on the call who fall anywhere in between those two poles. So you'll want to note that if you've applied for other grants in the past, some of this allowable use funding, some of the allowable uses may be familiar to you, and some you may have never had covered before by a grant. So just make sure you have information about personnel, expenses related to your facility, anything you've used to keep yourself, your staff, your children, and the families who you interact with healthy and safe during this time, equipment and supplies that you use in your business, goods and services, any mental health services for you and your staff, and then past expenses. When your grant application is released where you live, make sure that you ask all of the questions you have about the specific allowable uses that you might be interested in covering with the Child Care Stabilization Grant. We can go to the next slide. As I said before, the terms reporting and monitoring may come up in the Child Care Stabilization Grant application or implementation process. Those terms aren't meant to intimidate, but rather think of them as an opportunity for you to build systems within your own business for collecting and reporting out information. You might be asked information that you've never been asked before, and it's not meant to be punitive or intimidating, but it's meant to help inform your state, tribe, or territory about how the funding might be used or how it has been used if they're asking you a few years in the future. You'll want to make sure that you understand the reporting requirements where you live, where your business operates, so that you can make sure to meet any requirements and be on top of any deadlines. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to First Children's Finance Chief Program Officer, Heidi Hagelbreit.
Hi, everyone. I am going to move to the next slide about reporting and monitoring. Oh, sorry. Hold on one second. Okay.
So, well, there we go. Heidi's going to talk to you in depth about allowable uses and take it from there. So if we could just get to the allowable uses slide that comes right after this one, we'll be all set.
Okay. Sorry about that, Molly. I think the numbers are different on different parts of the screen. So as we talked
Oh, sorry. I thought while we were making a little bit of a transition, we never heard from Letha. I'm not sure if she's still on and she'd like to share something. Letha, are you still on?
I'm here. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, yay.
Well, so much great information has been shared already. And thank you, Patty and Heidi and all the folks at First Children's Finance. So good afternoon, and I bring greetings on behalf of the leadership at the Office of Child Care and say help is on the way. At the Office of Child Care, we realize the work you do is critical to our children, our families, and our communities. In response to the urgent needs you may be facing as a result of the COVID-19 public health emergency, we want you to know that help is on the way. The American Rescue Plan Act was signed, as you've heard, into law on March 11, 2021, and includes approximately $24 billion for child care stabilization grants and $15 billion in supplemental child care development fund dollars. This represents the single largest investment in child care in our nation's history. Today, as you've heard before I came on, you'll learn about the stabilization grants and how to be prepared when they are made available by your state, territory, or tribe. Right now, you may be faced with a multitude of challenges. We know that about 1 in 4 childcare providers that were open at the start of the pandemic are now closed. Those of you who have stayed open have gone through enormous lengths to do so. 2 in 5 providers report taking on debt for their programs using personal credit cards to pay for increased costs, and 3 in 5 work in programs that have reduced expenses through layoffs, furloughs, or pay cuts. 1 in 6 childcare jobs, generally held by women of color, still haven't come back. This represents much more than 1 in 20 jobs that have been lost throughout the country. By offering much needed and immediate economic relief to childcare programs like yours, this funding aims to help you with some of the impacts caused by the pandemic. Providers can spend stabilization grants on some of the things that you heard previously mentioned, as well as on a variety of operating expenses, including wages and benefits, rent and utilities, cleaning and stabilization supplies and services, and other goods and services necessary to maintain or resume your childcare services. Your state, territory, or tribe is currently working to make grants and applications available to your childcare programs. At the Office of Child Care, we want you to be prepared when the grants applications become available. Today, as you've heard previously, you'll find out about how to access grants and some of the tools and resources that will support your application when funding becomes available. So on behalf of the Office of Child Care, we thank you for being here, and sorry for the technical glitches, but sure you'll find this information so important to your work. And thank you for the important work that you do every day, despite the challenges and obstacles in supporting families so they can work, and for taking care of our nation's children. So thank you, and I'll pass it back off to Patty to continue the webinar.
I think we'll just jump back into the webinar. Thank you so much, Litha, for those comments and those great reminders about how important the work is that everyone who is on this call today is doing. And so we know that these funds are important. We know that they're needed, they're critical, and are key to the stabilization and the economic recovery of childcare businesses everywhere. So with that, why don't we move to the next slide? So in the chat, a couple of people have asked, how similar will these spending categories be from state to territory to tribe? And of course, there is a lot of differentiation and a lot of flexibility available to states. There are these categories and no more. So there could be fewer of them, but there will be no more than what you see on your screen right now. Just let me remind you that, and when I'm saying childcare businesses, I'm really talking about childcare centers, out of school time, after school, summer enrichment, all programs that are caring for children. So although I'm going to use the word center probably often in my comments today, please know that I'm really talking about the childcare business, even if you don't necessarily think of yourself as using the terminology of childcare. So broadly, the child care stabilization grants can be used for personnel, things that have to do with your facility and the operation of that facility, PPE, cleaning, health and sanitation and safety standards, equipment and supplies, goods and services, mental health services, and in some cases, past expenses. So we're going to go through each one of these to make sure that we can answer those questions in depth, provide you some ideas about where to identify these costs and what may be some points for you to think about. You can go ahead to the next slide. So let's start with personnel costs. This broadly, as you can see in the orange, is expenses that cover the payment and benefits of people who work inside of your business. Oh, go back, please. There you go. It includes some pointers about where you can find this information. So in your application from your state, territory, or tribe, If you're the entity from whom you are applying for the stabilization grant asks you about personnel, these are some of the places that you might find financial information related to this category. It is certainly going to be the pay, the compensation, the wages, the benefits that you are paying for any employees of the business. You may find that information in your payroll records. You may find that information in benefit reports when you pay your portion of maybe the health insurance bill or the insurance coverage or the dental coverage bill. The benefits and the enrollment of employees in those programs will come to you in a regular report, potentially every payroll or each month that you are paying those bills. You may also have a need to provide premium pay to be able to staff up, to recruit new folks to come and work in your program, to hire new teachers, assistant teachers, aides, and other personnel to be able to operate classrooms, programs, etc. And sometimes that may be something called hazard pay. It may be bonuses, or it might be premium pay, where you are paying a wage that is higher. All of those are eligible costs in this category, including staff bonuses. And one last thing to think about is that all of this funding is tied to the COVID-19 epidemic. And so as your staff are taking time off to either receive a vaccination, to travel to a vaccination appointment, or to recover from side effects from a vaccination appointment, those are also costs that you might be able to consider in this category of costs. Next slide, please. Next, we're going to talk about the category that is referred to as rent, utilities, facilities, maintenance, and insurance. Pretty straightforward, but it is payments for any of the facilities that you are operating your child care program, summer enrichment, after school, or out of time program in. So the bricks and mortar, the four walls and the roof, where you are providing services, this is potentially what we're talking about. You may own, lease, or rent your facility. All of those payments are applicable in the spending category. If in the past, during COVID, if you were tight on cash flow or you had temporary closures and you are behind on payments or you paid late fees, that may also be something that could be eligible in this category. Remember always to refer to the state, territory, or tribe's application and their criteria in each of these categories. But broadly, these are the things that could be included. They may also include insurance, general liability insurance, property insurance, any of the business insurance that you may carry for the program that you're operating. Utilities are also included here, so things like sewer, water, garbage, phone, some of the broadband may also be included as a utility. You may also be eligible to allocate costs that are maintenance expenses or charges that you have incurred to be compliant with COVID-19 safety protocols in your facility. So have you added safety equipment or barriers or things that make your facility healthy and safe for children and families? Those are things that would be eligible and covered in this cost category. And then finally, you may be able to make some minor improvements, some maintenance, or some renovation to your childcare facility as it relates to COVID-19 response. So your state, territory, and tribe is going to give you specific guidance about what's eligible and what is not. But make sure that you are tracking your expenses to be able to comply with providing adequate information. And again, let me just say this again, because I think it bears repeating, is that no state, no territory, no tribe is behind schedule. Each one of them has their own timeline for producing the application process and getting the stabilization grants out the door. Some of those may be happening now. Some of those may be happening in the future. They all will happen. But if this guidance is not available yet in your state, territory, or tribe, don't panic. Don't call and leave an angry voicemail. It's coming, but these are just things for you to prepare. So as you think about what the pandemic has changed in your business, what is going to carry forward, these are really great things to start to pull together information inside of your own program now to be ready for those applications. And now we can go to the next slide. Goods and services is a very broad category, and I think it covers a lot of ground. It is payments or purchases to update or supplies, the updating of supplies to help run your childcare business through the COVID-19 crisis. That may be food. That may be consumable materials like diapers, wipes, toilet paper, paper towels, paper plates, all of the things that are consumed by the children and the staff in your program. It may be learning materials, games, toys, indoor equipment, outdoor equipment. It may be cribs, sheets, other materials for napping or sleeping. It could be books, workbooks, learning materials, craft materials, and it may also include licenses and anything that is a fee or an expense related to your licensing. There's a lot of things that could fit under this category. Again, you're going to want to refer to the specific criteria put forward by your territory, tribe, or state for specific guidance about what kinds of costs will be allowed in this category. Next slide, please. Equipment and supplies is payments or costs for the supplies or materials that you have purchased to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is specifically about being able to expand your technology, your broadband, your ability to provide different kinds of programming, and to operate your business more efficiently and effectively. So some of the things that might not have occurred to you, but I think are important to think about are accounting software, payroll software or services, software or material to track and report public health data, health monitoring equipment. So if you're taking temperatures at the door, if you are taking extra measures to ensure the health and safety of children, families, staff, and employees, those are important things to consider in this category. If you had to make or need to make updates to your computers, to smartphones, to tablets, anything to be able to provide services in new and different ways that have stretched your capacity, this is a great way to think about how that equipment and supply line may cover some of the costs of how you've changed doing business in your program. I think this is particularly important for those out of school providers, out of school time providers, summer enrichment folks, where if you've been in a state where kids have been out of school and not back in school, and you're continuing to serve those children even now, those are important costs that need to be covered because you have probably expended capital to be able to serve those older children well and adequately and connect them to their distance learning activities. Next slide, please. It goes without saying, this is a really important category, personal protective equipment, also referred to as PPE, cleaning and other health and safety practices. This is broadly any payments or supplies purchased or materials purchased to keep the childcare business staff healthy, the children healthy, and everyone who's coming in or out of your facility healthy during the COVID-19 pandemic. It includes anything that you're using to be able to ensure health and safety practices and protocols. It might be wipes, bleach, soap, disinfecting materials. It might be face shields, masks, other PPE, disposable gloves. It may include training on how to do enhanced cleaning processes. It may also be a professional cleaning company. So if you had to shut down because of an exposure and you to ensure the safety and ensure the confidence of folks who are coming in and out of your program, hire a professional janitorial service or disinfecting service. That is something that is eligible here. And it may also include background checks or any of the other safety and health training that is required. It is important to make sure that you are looking. I'm going to call back to something that Molly mentioned earlier about the attestations. And that is, of course, all of these funds will be connected to following the CDC guidance about safe opening and operating protocols. And so any of the costs that may be incurred to meet that standard are eligible in this cost category. Next slide, please. Mental health services. And wow, this is a really important category. It is an important acknowledgement of how difficult this work has been over the last 15 to 18 months. And we are not out of the woods yet in dealing with some of the trauma and mental health that the pandemic has brought to the children in our programs, the staff in our programs, and yourself as the administrator, owner, or director of the program. So this is an important thing to make sure that you are providing to your staff. This is any payments made to support the mental health of children in your program or to the staff that are employed by your program. This could include infant and early childhood mental health consultation, and it could include mental health consultations for you or your employees. And if you are not thinking about expenditures in this category, I really would encourage you to think about a comprehensive plan to care for the health and well-being of the staff who have been with you through this entire pandemic, who are returning and have had many different impacts because of COVID-19. That mental health support is critical, necessary, and if you're going to have the culture of a responsive place of employment, that's a great way to expend some of those dollars. Next category, please. Or next slide. Past expenses. I think this is a special note. Your state, your territory, or your tribe is going to determine whether or not past expenses are allowable. And let me just be clear that past expenses are still within the categories, the other 6 categories that we described earlier in this presentation. So this is not something that is outside of the realm or range of those categories, but it could be past expenses that you incurred because of the pandemic, either responding to the pandemic that happened prior to March 11th of 2021, or to any of the expenditures that you might have incurred because of a closure, a temporary closure, either voluntarily or because your state, territory, or tribe disallowed childcare services for a period of time. This is not a guarantee. However, it is a possibility. So look to your territory, tribe, or state administrator to make decisions and provide guidance about what will be allowed and if it will be allowed in the application process. Next slide, please. So I think this is just a gentle reminder again, all states, all territories, all tribes are in the design process of their applications. That is a longer process and a shorter process. They have different timelines in mind. These childcare stabilization grants will come, but they are not behind in any way, shape, or form if they're not available currently in your state. However, as an administrator, as an owner, as an entrepreneur, as the director of a program that is serving young children or school-age children or summer enrichment programs, now is the time for you to be ready. If you live in a state where applications are open, we want you to apply, certainly. But if those applications are not available to you currently, and I will venture a guess to say that that is the majority of folks, the majority of states, territories, and tribes, now is your time to get ready. So we can go to the next slide. What is so critical is about getting your own house in order. Don't wait for the application to be published to then start thinking about how to be ready. So now is the time to start thinking about what are the benefits and the costs of taking the Child Care Stabilization Grant. And I certainly hope that you will consider taking on the Stabilization Grant. It's designed specifically for childcare. It will be as flexible and friendly as any other available public funding anywhere else. And so I highly encourage you to consider it. And even if there are tax implications, even if there are attestations that are new to you, it's really a benefit to you and important to the financial sustainability of your childcare business. So number one, first determine if you're eligible. And every state, territory, and tribe may have some different targets. They may have some different eligibility criteria. And it's important to note that there could be multiple pools of grants under the same state. And so there may be differentiating eligibility even in where you live. So make sure that you understand all of the eligibility criteria. Complete the applications. Make sure that you do them carefully, that you answer the questions to the best of your ability. And then number four, ask questions and request technical assistance. Many states, many territories, and many tribes are providing technical assistance that is available and designed specifically for childcare businesses, family childcare, small one owners, small childcare centers, large franchises, any school-based program. There's lots of different entities who apply for these funds. And there is most likely going to be someone in your local area who can help to answer questions as they come up based on the specific questions in the application in your state, territory, or tribe. So don't hesitate to ask for help. This is an opportunity for you to make sure that you're answering those questions as clearly and concisely and accurately as possible. And don't be afraid to ask for a translation, ask for an explanation, or ask for a methodology about how to provide the information that your local government entity or administrator may be asking for. The next thing that I want you to do is to think about how you're going to get ready. And the most important thing to pay attention to is that your state, territory, or tribe is most likely going to ask you some questions as a result of this grant. Things like, what did you spend it on? Did you spend it in the allowable categories? And so if you don't have a good accounting system, if you don't have a good financial tracking system, this is a really important part about getting ready for the application, is making sure that you're going to be able to say, I got this amount of money from my state, from my territory, or from my tribe. I can use it in these 6 categories. This is how I'm going to spend it, and here's how I'm going to track that spending. If you're using accounting software, that will be much more easy for you to track, but not impossible if you're not. If you're not using an accounting payroll system or an accounting system, don't panic. Comprehensive doesn't mean expensive, and it doesn't mean difficult. So we have some resources that are coming for you after this webinar has completed that will allow you to track spending in different categories over a period of time. It can be really simple and accurate and comprehensive. It does not need to be super expensive or super difficult. So it's just being thorough is the idea here. But if this is new to you, now is the time to start thinking about that and getting ready for that, because that compliance is going to be very important. Next slide. I want you to think about all of the opportunities that are available to you. Specifically, we are talking about the American Rescue Plan Child Care Stabilization Grants today. But Molly and I work on the business side of childcare. This is good advice to apply to any opportunity, but specifically to the Child Care Stabilization Grants. There will be some administrative burden and some capacity that you may need to have in order to monitor these grants and comply and report on them. So just be prepared. Know what the report is going to look like from your state, territory, and tribe. Know what you're going to be asked to track over time. And again, doesn't have to be a really sophisticated or highly technological response, but you have to be able to know what you're spending, where, and when, and report that later. So know what the monitoring requirements are for your entity, what they're going to ask you to track, what they're going to ask you to report, and also any of the attestations or the promises that you make when you apply for this money. You promise, I will use it for these things. I will follow these guidelines. And so make sure that you're aware of all of those when you do the application and the attestation. So keep all of those things in mind. That first row, they're all separate things, but really connected. That bottom row is, of course, the reporting requirements and setting up your system to be able to track what those are. So that might mean for you having a restricted fund inside of your accounting software where you restrict the dollars to be used in different places. And if you're a nonprofit who receives grants, this is something that you do all the time. But if you are a small, single entrepreneur, you're the only owner, you have one location, this might be something new for you. And so being able to track your expenses over time is going to be really important for you to do. Finally, make sure that you have a system to track your staffing costs. Now, remember, we talked about it's not just the payroll and benefits. It may also be staff bonuses. It could be premier pay. It could be time off dealing with vaccination. And so a way for you to be able to understand where that information is, where it lives for your business, and to be able to pull that out and report that is going to be important. And cost allocation really is just a fancy way to say, are you spending it in the right places? So if your state says, hey, how do you think you're going to spend your dollars? Check these boxes, and you check 5 of them. Figure out how you're going to have to report on those 5 categories, what you'll be asked to provide, what you'll be asked to report back, and how you're going to allocate those costs. Namely saying, here's the money that I'm going to put towards these eligible expenses. How will I allocate those over the grant term? Next slide. So again, I think I've said it, for the 3rd time now, no state, no territory, no tribe is behind. There's a different timeline. They are super, super busy, frantically working on their application processes. This is a huge undertaking for states, territories, and tribes. And so be patient as they try to design processes that are responsive, that are thinking about the priorities in your state, and that are easy for you to apply for. That's a huge undertaking, a Herculean task. They are busy working on it. While they're putting together those application processes, it's time for you to do some things. Number 1, think about how you're going to plan for the application and start to gather information. If you don't have a tax ID number yet, if you don't have some clear organizational information pulled together yet, now's the time to do that. If you have learned anything from the pandemic and prior experiences in receiving grants, payments, PPP loans, EIDL loans, you have learned the lesson throughout COVID-19 of the importance of having all of those organizational documents and information at your fingertips. Now's the time to take that lesson and move it beyond COVID into economic recovery. Make sure that you're starting to gather that information, that you have it ready, that you aren't caught short at the end of a timeline because of something you could have taken care of now. So now's the time, once and for all, get those things ready. I would challenge you also to think about how can you optimize the Child Care Stabilization Grant as an opportunity to improve your financial sustainability. How can you become more stable in your business operations? Now, only you can answer this question. You are the decision maker inside of your program, or you need to collaborate with the other decision makers. What is going to make most difference to your program? Is that using some of the cost categories around personnel? Is that your largest line item? How will you apply this opportunity to your business in a way that allows you to recover more quickly? There is not a business that I don't think in our industry that has adversely been affected by COVID. So this is not the time to sort of like hang out the flag of I don't need any help. This is a general universal acknowledgement that childcare was universally damaged by the pandemic. And so don't leave this opportunity behind, and also be intentional and thoughtful about how it can bring you into the future. If you are a very small operation, or you just are not very sophisticated, this is a great opportunity for you to think broadly about the efficiency and effectiveness of your operations. Do you need some investments in accounting? Do you need some investments in improving your capacity to be able to comply with public funding? If this is your first foray into public funding, let's not make it your last. So let's figure out how you can be better at this. If your program has struggled to manage public funds in the past, how can you resolve that for the future and use this opportunity to increase your organizational capacity to do this well? And then finally, think about intermediaries who can assist you with business and finance questions. So Molly and I, of course, this is our core work. This is what we do every day, is we deal with business and finance questions. But there are lots of folks in your local area that are also great resources for you to go to if Molly and I happen not to be in your neighborhood. So, and many of you actually are here on the call today, learning from as much as you can. And so if you are an intermediary, think about all of the information you've heard today. Come to another webinar we're hosting tomorrow for intermediaries, but think about all of the stuff here, critical questions, and what kinds of information that you can provide, what kinds of resources can be provided to childcare businesses, out of school time providers, summer enrichment programs, after school folks that will help them apply for these opportunities. And here, let me tell you guys this, if you are running a program, this is when you are not shy about asking for help and assistance. This opportunity is designed specifically for you. We do not want you to let it pass you by because something isn't translated, something feels unclear, or it's using highly technical financial terms that you don't understand. If that's the case, do not let that stop you. I want you to push through it. I want you to find the people who are going to help you understand that. And to that end, we're going to start moving towards some resources here. So let's advance to the next slide. The next thing that I just want to highlight is that there are a lot of resources and some forthcoming from First Children's Finance that are not official yet, but will be on our website and the website where you will find the recording of this webinar very soon. So in the interim, let's talk about where you can find some other information that might be helpful. We can go to the next slide. And this is where I think I pass it back to you, Patty.
Hi, thanks so much, Heidi and Molly. And we've been trying to keep up with questions in the chat box, and we will continue to answer questions as they come in. A lot of questions came in about where can we find additional information? How do we know when our stabilization grants are released? How do we know who to ask for help? So we wanted to share with you two actual email address or websites that might be able to help you. And I know Molly's been putting some in the chat box as well. The first is childcare.gov, That's a really easy one to remember. And it is, the URL is childcare.gov. And once you get there, you'll click on where it says COVID-19 resources, and you'll see this button that says Child Care Provider, State and Territory COVID-19 Resources. Once you click on that, you'll see a state and territory listing, and it will have all of the context that you might need, both for operation during COVID-19, um, uh, such as the general COVID-19 provider page. But as applications are being released, we're also putting a link to the applications on that page too. So if you mark that page and you come to it and visit it every so often, that's one way to find out. The other thing that is included where it's available on that page are business resources that your state or territory has made available for providers. So you can click there to go see what other business resources are available. And if there are other funding sources available, you can click there as well. I'm going to move to the next slide too, because you'll also notice that there's a child care stabilization grant information, and that's the URL that Molly has been putting in the chat every so often, either the overview of the stabilization guidance and or the grant information page itself. That has a special section for providers. That's where you're going to find this webinar will be posted, and you'll find additional information about eligibility, the allowable expenses that Molly and Heidi talked about, and information to direct you to your state and territory resource page. I know that we also have some tribes on the phone, so for tribally operated programs, there are also resources that are being developed specifically for you. I put an email in the chat, and I'll put it in again before we close so that you can use that email to reach out to find out where you might find the tribally relevant information. Molly and Heidi also talked about some resources and tools that will be made available to help you. Those you will also be able to find where this webinar will be posted on the resource page. And so I'm going to pause there to see if there were some other questions that came in the chat that Molly or Heidi you might want to answer.
Patty, I just see a couple questions about taxes and the tax implications of the child care stabilization grants. In the federal legislation, it does not address taxes at all. So I think it is safe to assume that this income would be taxable unless your state, territory, or tribe makes that not taxable. That is definitely a possibility. And so keep that in mind. But I think it's important to keep it first and foremost, assume it will be taxable. And if it's not, yay, that's great. But if it is, you're prepared.
Thanks.
Heidi, and Patty, there have also been several questions about the timeline. When will the grant application be released? What's the deadline? When does this all wrap up? Another person pointed out how much information this all is. So I want to respond to two of those things. First, to the timeline. We sound a little repetitive, but part of the point of these childcare stabilization grants is to make sure that each tribe, state, and territory who's administering them is meeting their local needs. So they'll determine a timeline within the requirements of the law. and they will release the application. And so we don't have specific answers about the specific timeline where you live, but we know that it's coming. And so stay tuned and reach out to a reliable source of information where you or your business is located to make sure that you're staying current about the grant opportunity and the application and the requirements. To this other person's point about it being a lot of information, it is a lot of information. I agree. But you're early. You showed up here today. You've been taking notes. You've been asking questions. You've been receiving resources. You've been getting responses. You are beginning the process of becoming an informed applicant if that's a business decision that you decide to make for your business. So I can't tell you what to do, but I encourage you not to be overwhelmed. You are really ahead of the game here. You're getting your information, and I encourage you to keep asking questions. Even after we wrap up today, reach out to your state, tribe, or territory. Reach out to the people who are listed on one of the last slides for contact information. Send your questions in now via chat because people want this information to be distributed and they want this funding to support childcare businesses. So make sure that you know you're doing great, you're in the right spot for you or your business, and you're going to get your questions answered as long as you keep asking them. That was it, Patty, from me.
Thanks. There are a number of questions because we're seeing a lot of people who have taken advantage or are being offered other types of grants now through their state, territory, or tribe. So I brought this graphic back up again so that you know about the three pieces of legislation, and I talked about it and Heidi and Molly talked about it. The CARES Act was passed and the CURSA Act was passed in 2020. Both of those had funds to support childcare. So it is possible that the grants you're receiving today or that you've been notified about today are being funded from funds made available through the passage of that legislation or even from other funding sources. So I would just ask, again, what I would say is the majority of states, territories, and tribes have not yet released their stabilization grant application. So just ask, say, is this out of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, or will those stabilization grants be forthcoming? And but if a number of other folks have also mentioned about finance and business assistance for your child care center. So you do have our email address, and we can likely link you up with the person in your state, territory, or within for your tribe that's providing some finance and business supports and assistance for you. So if you reach out to us after the webinar, that's something that we'll probably find out for you. And Molly and Heidi, anything else?
I would just repeat exactly what both you and Molly have said, and I just want to re-emphasize how important it is to realize that this is the interim time where you can be getting ready. You can be thinking about what the application process might include, how you might be able to use those funds, and to kind of get your house in order. Some questions have come in about like the payroll protection program. This is completely different and separate. If you applied for, received, were denied, those are not connected here at all. If you applied for the economic injury disaster loan grant or loan and you were successful or unsuccessful, again, not connected. You may have already received some payments from other funds, like the picture just showed that Patty showed, that were from CARES Act funding or from CURSA funding. And so, again, not necessarily connected. So just continue to be thoughtful about your business operations, think about what you might be struggling with the most right now. Because I'm speaking to a child care center, a staffed program audience, I'm going to guarantee that all of you are struggling to find workforce. So think about how the stabilization grants might enable you to bring folks back into your program as employees and resolve some of the pressing issues that you have operating your program. So use it strategically, use it intentionally, and the good news is if the application window isn't open in your state, territory, or tribe, this is the time for you to get ready. That's not a bad place to be. So now's the time to think critically about how to leverage this opportunity and how to put forward a successful application.
Great. And it looks like, again, you know, a lot of states, territories, and tribes are offering grants and other supports through some of those other funding. To reiterate about the webinar and when it will be available, we will make it 508 compliant, and we will post the recording, and we will send an email to all of those of you who are online who participated, so that you know exactly where to get it. But we do encourage you, and Molly said it a couple times, this is a starting point, so we do encourage you to visit the sites on this slide in particular, that have also been in the chat, and we'll include them in the follow-up, because that's where you can go to learn more information and really figure out how these stabilization grants might apply to your center. And Linda has a question. Molly and Heidi, I'm not sure if one of you would like to take it.
Oh, Linda asks, will this help cover the lost tuition when we had to close our center? It's a great question, Linda. I think it depends, first and foremost, if your state, territory, or tribe is going to include past expenses as an allowable category. If that is included, then yes, absolutely. And here's the good news, Linda, is even if they don't include that, what happens is, let's say that you use your grant to pay for staff. The amount of money that you apply frees up some cash for you to be able to put back into the business to recoup some of your costs. So either yes directly or yes indirectly, if that makes sense to you.
Great, thanks, Heidi. And I think that, Heidi, would you reiterate about if they had applied for a grant previously? Because again, I'm seeing that several have applied for grants just this week.
Yeah. I think what you drove home is the point that for the majority of states, territories, and tribes, their application processes are not open. There are just a handful of places that have their applications open. So if you have an application that's open, hang up from this webinar, call them up and say, is this the Child Care Stabilization Grant? If they say yes, then you're in the right spot. And if they say no, say, when is that coming? And then ask them what it is. If you applied for PPP and were accepted or denied, this has nothing to do with child care stabilization grants. If you applied for the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan grant or loan, and you were successful or were denied, it has nothing to do with this. If you applied for other grants that may have been available in your state, territory, or tribe previously, like 6 months ago, this has nothing to do with the stabilization grants. So just check in with whoever you put those applications forward, if they're really recent, and ask if they are the child care stabilization grants. And if they're not, don't worry about it. There are a lot of funding streams. So just one other point, not to complicate things, but there are child care stabilization grants. These are available just to child care businesses. There are other grant opportunities out in the world that have nothing to do with childcare that may be local to the community, county, city, the place that you live. Don't forget that you're also eligible for lots of these opportunities. This is the only childcare specific stabilization opportunity for you. So don't hesitate to ask lots of questions to any past or current application processes that you're involved in. But if you were involved in something in the past, it is most likely not connected to this opportunity.
Patty, I would love to pose a question to you just to get people some information from your perspective. There are several business owners who are with us today, center directors, etc., who might be applying for state grants for the very first time. And there's some questions about where they should get information. I noticed that there have been some responses about emailing after the chat. If people need information on just the very first stop, just figuring out who will release information about childcare stabilization grants where their business is located, should they put something in the chat and you can follow up with them after? Or is there a link or a website they could go to that would sort of help them sort through who their first point of information might be?
Their first point of information to get ready, or their first point of information to find out about the applications?
Both. If they've never applied for a grant where they live yet, and they
If
aren't
you've
sure.
never, okay. If you've never applied for a grant where you live, and you're not sure what to do in applying for a grant, there are resources that we can make available to you that will be available just to help you with that. We can also direct you to people in your state, territory, and or your tribe that can support you in your business operations. So we can tell you who's doing that. If somebody is where you live, and if somebody isn't, then we can perhaps get you connected with somebody who can help you. So that's just general business supports and resources to help you apply for stabilization grants or any other kind of funding that you might be applying for. Now, specifically about the stabilization grants, your best bet to keep an eye on that is to pay close attention to any information that you might get from licensing, from your CCDF administrator, any other state, your R&R, your AUYC affiliate, your any other kind of communication connections that you might have in your state or territory with your tribe. And also, once the applications are released, those application sites will be posted on the childcare.gov provider page that I showed you. So you will be able to link right from that page to where the stabilization grant information is. And again, I just want to reiterate, and a couple of you have asked what Heidi said. Your states aren't behind. We're just trying to get you prepared for when those applications become available. And so you can also always, you have our email, you can also always email our email box and say any word, and we can check and see if the application has come out, and we can send you the link that we know. Your R&Rs, your early childhood hubs, your whoever you turn to for help, licensing, subsidy offices, etc., should be able to let you know once these funds are available. But again, a lot of the what's happening in the chat box, Heidi's right. Find out if that's stabilization grants or not that you have already applied to, and if not, keep a lookout for the stabilization grants and apply for a stabilization grant as well. Did that answer it, Molly?
It did. In the meantime, there have been several of the same questions. So thank you, Patty, for that answer. And I want to respond to all the people who are asking for a link to the application grants. So the link to your application grant will come from your state, tribe, or territory. We do not have that. We're not holding it back. The application may not exist yet in your state, tribe, or territory. But as Patty mentioned, your CCR&R, your state licensing, the contacts listed at the end of this, or state, tribe, or territory licensing contacts, or the contacts at the end of this webinar, you can reach out to them and hopefully they can direct you to the place where the link will be located and or someone who can answer your question about where to get the link.
It is likely that there are some grants that are being made available now or that have been made available just in the past month or so are being financed by funds made available through those other pieces of legislation. And the American Rescue Plan had specific funds targeted for states, territories, and tribes to be used for stabilization grants. So again, make sure that you understand and that you take advantage of and apply for the stabilization grant. And again, for Texas, somebody's asking about Texas. If the application is available and you go to the childcare.gov COVID-19 provider resources page, the link is there, and I'm sure somebody will put it in the chat, and you click on Texas. If the application is there and available for Texas, it will show up there, so you'll be able to see it. And it is possible, again, that the funds being made available now in Texas and in other states and territories are not American Rescue Plan funds. They are those grants are being funded by other sources of funding. So now while we finish, and I know we're probably going to wrap up just a little bit early, I'm going to have Violetta pull up the first poll. We have just a few polls that we want to ask you while we continue to answer some of the questions that that are still appearing in the chat. Or Heidi or Molly, anything that you want to share?
I can't think of anything to add at this point. Just encouraging you to think about how to be ready for the applications and how to think strategically about this opportunity and how to apply it to your business to increase your financial sustainability into the future.
And for those of you who are applying for grants for the very first time, asking questions does not and should not count against you. So don't be afraid if you applied for something already to just call the information on the confirmation that you submitted your application and say, can you tell me how this grant is funded? Where is this coming from? Is this an American Rescue Plan Child Care Stabilization Grant? No question should count against you. You are trying to get the information that you need to make important decisions about your business. So I just want to end with that.
That's great. And if you want to go to the next poll, that'd be great. And Anna did, while we were on the line, go to the COVID-19 provider resources page. So again, heed Molly's advice and call. Uh, and Janet asked how she knows what grants are available. Again, if you go to the COVID-19 provider resource page, it does have financial supports and resources and other information for providers. If you can't find what you're looking for there, just send us an email, and we'll put our email up here and also in the chat. And we'll see if we can find out for you. And if you
I
want to
have
put
one,
the
Patty, I have one closing piece of advice, which we learned throughout the PPP application process, which is if you have a very active spam filter on your email account, you might be wanting to check your spam folder. These applications may come from an email address you've never received mail from before, or your spam filter might just be very aggressive. Make sure that you're not missing opportunities. Check your spam email folder in whatever email account that you do childcare business work in, so that you don't miss it or miss responses or questions about your application once it's submitted.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go ahead and we'll type the names of the presenters in, and again, make sure that you have all the links that you need, and we'll send a follow-up just as soon as we get the PowerPoint in a place 508 compliant, actually. We'll send a follow-up with your links too. To access additional information. And again, any questions or anything, our email address is here. Also, this Quality Assurance Center at ECETTA info, and we'll put that in the follow-up. You can reach out to us. Carol, if you want to go ahead and put our personal emails in the email box, you can do that, and we'll help you however we can access the information. But again, this is the time to start gathering information, consider the possibilities to help you make decisions. So Heidi, do you have anything else that you'd like to say?
Just thank you so much for attending. And these grants are really designed for childcare. This is the first time in my career I've seen anything like it. And so even if you don't feel like you have the perfect business that's exactly where you want it to be, don't let this opportunity pass you by. Don't let fear or the unknown keep you from accessing these dollars. They are a really fabulous opportunity, and you all have worked so hard over the past 15 to 18 months to stay alive. You are more than deserving of these funds. Don't let this opportunity slip past. You have to take advantage of it.
Thanks, Heidi. And with that, again, I'll put the email address in the chat box, and we'll stay on if you have additional questions. But we're giving you a little bit of time back in your day, and we certainly appreciate the time that you spent with us. And we're here to help you. Thank you, everyone.